we're going to go into the story summary. So it's quite a short poem. There's two characters, and it's important that one is male and one is female. The title is really key to this poem. So, Marrysong. They're married, and it's a exploration of what marriage is like for them. So, what their married relationship is like. So the male describes the female in terms of natural landscape and the ever-changing geography, which is her emotions. So there's just a ton of natural imagery and it's constantly changing, and that is used to reflect the constantly changing emotions and nature of the woman. So she feels hurt, and the man is trying to figure out why at the beginning of the poem, and then she changes and she's happy, and then she changes and she becomes faultlessly calm. So she's shifting from one extreme to the other, or from a very neutral position to a position of extreme emotion. And the man knows that it's not really possible to fully expect or understand all of her emotions because he doesn't feel things in the way that she does. But he finds it really extraordinary and refreshing and interesting. And he is really committed and dedicated to her. So he wonders what things go through her head. He makes it part of his job as her husband to chart her behavior, to try and record it so that he can understand and predict it better. Sorry, I wrote something weird here. To record it and make note. Sorry, I was just like, what on earth did I type there? Record it and make notes so that he can understand and predict it better. Every time he feels like he has got a grasp on it, she changes again unexpectedly. So for many people, this might be quite frustrating if you're in this kind of relationship. But for this man, he's saying that this is part of what marriage is like, and it's what part of life is like, and how relationships between people should be. And it's quite natural, which is reinforced by the natural imagery. And also that it's really refreshing and interesting and not boring because, something new happens every day. So there's advantages to this type of behavior. And he finds it quite creative rather than limiting. So I think it's a nice message, really, because it's sort of a message about embracing people who have complex emotions or changing emotions, and embracing sadness as well as happiness, and also the kind of fluctuations in life and how we cope with those via emotion. So it's not, there's no kind of annoyance or frustration on the part of the man, even if he doesn't quite fully understand. He's really trying to, and he's 100% committed to his wife. So I think it's a really beautiful poem in that respect. I'm quite a crazy emotional person, so I like go from like having a great day to just terrible and back again. So I kind of identify more with the female persona. Um, so I think it's nice to put a perspective on that, it's not necessarily, you shouldn't really try and change yourself and feel bad about that. And there are people out there who can, cope with that and actually find it refreshing rather than rather than being like, why are you so up and down all the time or all over the place? As teenagers, as many of you might be taking these lessons, you probably experience this in an even more intense way just because your hormones are shifting, you're growing and changing that way, and you're sort of figuring out who you are as a person in life. So, so hopefully a lot of you can actually, you really get this poem on that kind of emotional level and you can identify with that as well. So a little bit of context and themes to finish off then. I've tried to sort of whiz through this poem so that you get a kind of, sort of hit in the face with analysis. So you just like inspired perhaps and motivated and you know what to say about it. So like a lot of poems in the Cambridge collection, if that's what you're doing this poem for, Dennis Scott was a Jamaican poet, and you can see the tropical influence of the Caribbean in his use of imagery and weather, especially when he talks about the sea, I think. So it's quite nice because his ideas of landscape are quite tethered to that location, really. His imagery might have been different if he lived in England, for example. Scott was really multidisciplinary, meaning he did lots of different things and he excelled in many fields. So he was a poet, a playwright, a dancer, an actor, a teacher. He might have been other things as well. So he's just generally quite a creative person who was very good at a lot of different things. It might not really help you know that or to analyze your poem. So with context, only use it if you're making a point where it fits in. Otherwise, it feels a bit kind of forced in there. And finally, also, if you're doing the IGCSE syllabus, he was good friends with Mervyn Morris, whose poem is also on here. So you might want to think about comparing and contrasting their poems perhaps at some point, because they come from a very similar background and they were good friends and they influenced each other. So finally then, we've kind of touched on these themes already, and I do always, with the themes, want you guys to come up with your own and your own messages about them and think about them deeper, because there's a difference between someone telling you what they think of the poem and what you feel yourself and how you interpret it. So always go into the themes for that and try and connect with them on a personal level. But this is my personal take on some of the major themes. So the first one is marriage. I think it's really positive about marriage, even though marriage is not straightforward and it's not always easy. Those things are seen as positive rather than negative. Like, difficulty is not necessarily a bad thing in life. You can overcome difficulties, you can adapt to changes, and that creates a lot of enjoyment. And maybe it would be sort of boring if everything was always the same. So I feel like it's a really core message of the poem, that this is how we should view marriage and relationships. With nature, I feel like nature is used as a metaphor for emotions, for love, for relationships, for marriage, for humanity. There's a lot of different things that nature represents in this poem. So you do want to explore those individually as well and think about how that is expressed. I think with Scott, he's sort of saying that these changes are natural because nature itself is always changing. It's not a static, fixed thing. So we should embrace that and find that refreshing, and maybe not even try to wish for something sort of stable and rigid and the same all the time, if that makes sense. With love, some people might actually interpret it as the man sort of loves the woman more because she's changing a lot and he's kind of trying to catch up with her and he's quite faithful to her, but there's no, it doesn't really show anything from the other way. But I would say that they have a mutual relationship and that they work really well, because the man sort of sees the effects of her love in the form of shadows, as we talked about already, and also that they're just very true to their natures, both of them. So the woman's not trying to be more stable for the man because she's just, herself. She's embracing her nature, and equally, he's not trying to be more chaotic for the woman. He's just embracing his natural tendency to be loyal and faithful and stable. So even though it's explored in sense of man and woman, you could get relationships or loves where the man is the kind of chaotic force and the woman is the non-chaotic force, or all sorts of different variations on that. So it's more about the complement of personalities, I think, and the way that they can express love differently, but the amount that they love is similar, and their commitment to each other is very much present. So it's kind of interesting, I think, that idea of love. Sorry, it's like ramble there, but hopefully you know what I mean. Sometimes my brain just goes off on a bit of off on one. Um, yeah, so finally, masculinity versus femininity. So this, again, it doesn't mean man versus woman necessarily. It's used quite traditionally in this poem. So the man exhibits typically masculine traits. He's stable, logical, calm, rational, and the female exhibits feminine traits. She's emotional but creative and energetic. So they are quite stereotypical in this poem, but I think it's more about the sort of combination of those personalities and how they complement than, like I was saying, the fact that all men should be like this man and all women should be like that woman. So if you're a stable, logical, calm woman, that's totally fine. And if you're a chaotic, emotional man, equally totally fine. So it's kind of about exploring different aspects to people's characters and how different types of characters can complement each other within a relationship. So that concludes this kind of quick fire lesson on Marrysong. Hopefully you're feeling quite confident on this poem. Hopefully you enjoy it. I really like it. I feel like it's quite an energizing type poem and it's really nice and cute and so on. So hopefully you feel similar and you're more confident on it now and you've enjoyed my take on what it's about.